It was a quiet night along Route 17, the kind of night when the hum of neon lights was the only thing keeping the darkness company. Inside Rusty's diner, the clock above the counter ticked lazily toward midnight. The booths were mostly empty, except for a few late-night truckers and a small group of Hell's Angels sitting in the far corner, their leather jackets reflecting the dull glow of the diner's flickering sign outside. The smell of burnt coffee and fried onions hung in the air, and the soft buzz of the jukebox mixed with the distant sound of motorcycles cooling down in the cold. Among the bikers sat Marcus Steele, broad-shouldered, silver-bearded, and calm in a way that made people think twice before crossing him. He wasn't the kind of man who liked attention, but he had that quiet authority that made everyone around him instinctively lower their voices. Marcus had seen every shade of cruelty the world had to offer on the road, in bars and in the eyes of men who thought power came from fear. Yet tonight something different caught his attention, something small, fragile, and far more unsettling than any fight he'd ever been in. Behind the counter, Lena Brooks moved like a ghost. She was the night cook and part-time waitress, working the graveyard shift for extra cash. Her uniform was neat but faded, her movements careful, too careful. Every time she smiled at a customer, her lips trembled slightly, as if even kindness had become a risk. And that's when Marcus saw it, a dark bruise deep and ugly at the corner of her lip. It wasn't from an accident. It wasn't from clumsiness. It was the kind of mark that told a story of silence, pain, and nights spent pretending nothing happened. Marcus stared for a long time, the flickering neon sign painting red and blue shadows across his face. He'd seen bruises like that before on his sister years ago, before she ran away from the man who broke her. He thought of her then, and the rage he'd buried deep began to stir again. But this wasn't a bar fight or a back row ambush. This was different. This was quiet suffering, the kind most people ignored because it wasn't loud enough to make them uncomfortable. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of standing up for others, make sure you like this video, share it with someone who still believes good people exist, and subscribe to our channel. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because what happens next will remind you that real strength isn't about fists, it's about heart. As the hours passed, Marcus noticed more. The way Lena flinched when the phone rang. The way her hand instinctively went to her lip whenever a car pulled into the parking lot. And then, just before closing, a black SUV screeched to a stop outside the diner. The air shifted instantly, heavy, uneasy. Lena froze, her face turning pale. Through the glass door, Marcus saw him, a man in a mechanic's jacket, mid-40s, broad build, anger written all over him. He stormed inside, slamming the door so hard that even the jukebox skipped. "Where the hell have you been?" He barked loud enough for everyone to hear. The diner went silent. Lena whispered, "I'm working, Tom." But the man, Tom Harris, her boyfriend, grabbed her wrist so hard the plate she was holding crashed to the floor. He yanked her close, his voice dripping venom. Marcus's hand tightened around his coffee cup until the ceramic cracked. He stood up slowly, every eye in the diner following him. His boots echoed against the tile floor as he approached the counter. Tom turned and barked, "This ain't your business, old man." But Marcus didn't flinch. He stood between them, calm but unmovable, his voice low and controlled. "She's working," he said, "and you're leaving." The way he said, it wasn't a request. It was a verdict. Tom laughed bitterly, trying to mask his fear. "You don't know who you're talking to." Marcus leaned in, eyes like ice. "No," he said, "you don't." For a moment no one breathed. Then, as Tom tried to shove past him, Marcus caught his arm in a grip like iron. "You ever touch her again," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "and I'll make sure you never raise that hand again." The diner fell deadly quiet. Even the hum of the light seemed to fade. Tom yanked his arm free, his pride bleeding faster than his courage, and stormed out into the night. The sound of his SUV peeling away broke the silence. Lena stood frozen, her hands shaking. Marcus turned to her, his expression softening. "You're safe now," he said simply. She tried to smile, but tears filled her eyes instead. The other bikers came closer, quietly, picking up the broken plate, mopping the spilled coffee. No words, just respect. From that night on, things changed. The next evening, every member of Marcus's crew showed up again, not to intimidate, but to protect. They filled the diner with laughter, with music, with warmth. They tipped heavy, made sure Lena never closed up alone, and waited every night until she locked the doors before riding off into the dark. Slowly, the fear in her eyes began to fade. She started wearing brighter lipstick again. She played her favorite old songs on the jukebox, and when a new customer asked about the bruise, she smiled softly and said, "It's gone for good." Weeks turned into months. Rusty's Diner became known as the Angel's Stop, not because it was run by bikers, but because it was protected by them. Lena found peace in that little diner, surrounded by people who didn't just eat there. They stood for her. Marcus never spoke of that night again, but every time he saw her smile without flinching, he knew he'd done something that mattered. Before this video ends, tell us in the comments, have you ever stood up for someone when it wasn't easy? Or has someone ever stood up for you when you needed it most? And if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness and courage can heal the deepest wounds, please hit the like button, share this story with someone who needs hope tonight, and subscribe for more real-life stories that prove humanity still lives in small acts of bravery. Because that night, inside a lonely roadside diner, a Hell's Angel didn't just stop a man from hurting a woman. He helped her remember what it felt like to be safe again. And sometimes that's all it takes to change a life forever.